All right, 5:02, you're ready to go.
Okay, good evening, everyone. This is a special meeting of the Common Council, the purpose of which is to hold continuing discussion regarding the position of city manager, city administrator. I will call the meeting to order. It is October 19th at 5 p.m. and I will call the roll. We'll start with Councilmember Murphy.
Here.
Councilmember Davies.
Here.
Councilmember Risberger.
Here.
Councilmember Lepari Shu.
Here.
Councilmember Carson has not joined us yet. Councilmember Harrington.
Here.
Councilmember Rafter.
Here.
Councilmember Drenick.
Here.
Okay. Okay. With that, all right, okay, our first order of business today was just as a recap. At the last meeting, there seemed to be unanimous consensus that the position of city manager would in the future be that of city administrator. And the first order of business today was discussion of any recommended changes to the job description as it's currently stated in the charter. So I will open it up to any council members who have come across any additions, deletions, modifications that they would like to recommend. Councilmember Murphy.
Thank you, Mayor. It's funny in going through the charter, I had circled number 10 and number 11 just for a little bit more clarity. So number 10 is shall participate in collective bargaining. And number 11 is shall lead the annual planning process. I just thought it might be helpful to include the department heads in that title as well. So it sounds a little bit more, it's a little more clear who's doing what.
So just to clarify, Luke, how would you include them?
I apologize, Mary. Do you mind? I'll think about it for a minute. I just recently got home for work. I just wanted to put that out there.
Okay. Let me just note that Councilmember Carson is present. Okay, Councilmember Risberger.
Yeah, under B, residency, looking at the housing issues we've had or currently have, and looking at what the previous three city managers, the issues they've had with finding a place to stay or to purchase, I would recommend crossing out, it says after the appointment, the city manager may reside outside the city on a temporary basis pursuant to the terms of a resolution of the Common Council. I think if we decide to go this way, we could strike on a temporary basis, or strike the entire second sentence and allow the city manager to live outside the city limits.
Okay, any discussion on that? Carson?
Dave, what's the reasoning behind that?
Because of the housing issues we have, where our housing stock is, I think we all know our housing stock, we have issues with it. And the last three city managers that came here and they were looking for a place to buy, they really struggled. Even George, and George was finally able to get a condominium downtown, but it wasn't the condo that he wanted. He initially had a walk-up rather than something with an elevator.
Oh, it's been the history of the city of Oneonta that all department heads live within the city of Oneonta. I'm not sure when we got away from that, but how do you have somebody invested into the city of Oneonta if they don't actually try to live here?
Well, it may be a rule that we have to revisit. I think if we allowed people to live outside the city, it may open up the number of people that apply for the job.
Just a clarification, I don't know that there are residency requirements on some positions, such as firefighters and police officers, for obvious reasons. I don't know if there are any residency requirements in any of the department heads. Council, you're on the same subject, Councilmember Drenick?
Yeah, it is the same subject. I just want to concur with Dave Risberger. I know when I moved to Oneonta, I moved specifically to come to Oneonta, but I found a place on Goodyear Lake, and it was great. But I spent an awful lot of my time in the city and the town of Oneonta, and I feel like aside from the housing stock, you can be just outside of this city and be very much engaged in the city, but find some things, some land, whatever. We may not have that available right in the confines of the city. So I think rather than limiting the options on people who, may be qualified for the job for the fact that they maybe want a little bit more space or maybe want something that, they can't find right in the city. I just want to echo Dave's thoughts on this.
Pari Shu?
Yeah, I need to agree with Len. I think for me, it's a big issue of bigger than the city manager. I sent out kind of an informal survey and got a graph back from some of our city staff with asking the question, who employed by the city lives in the city? And it's a startlingly low number. I think that there's some work there that could be done rather than writing off our housing stock. I think that we should work on ways to incentivize the people who work in and for our city to be able to live in the city that they serve and help us improve our housing stock. I 1000% agree that no one is really invested unless they see the potential and choose it. And I understand that can be hard. We don't have a ton of turnkey properties, but there are some, and I think that I don't think that we should write off our neighborhoods and just say that no one's going to want to live here. I think we need to do the work to make it so that someone will want to. I had something else, but it's escaped me. So thank you.
Rafter?
Just as a process, we only have so much time, and I know to be careful if we could get an idea of what are the other changes and then go to address them one by one based on the time we have.
Okay, well, we don't want to spend
Yeah.
half hour on this, but it's good just to get a sense of whether there is any support for it or not. If there's not if it doesn't seem to be a majority support, there's no sense even discussing any further. So we'll just get an initial sense.
Okay.
Davies?
I would suggest that I hear both sides of this argument, and I agree with both sides. Our housing stock is diminished. It might offer more opportunities and more folks to get into the pool if we open it up. But we need to rebuild our housing stock, and we can do so by bringing in good folks. I see both sides of this. I'd really like to try to find the sweet spot here and be able to propose that this not be an issue, this be looked at on a case-by-case basis, the way we do in other positions. So we maybe try to encourage it, but if someone were to come here and couldn't find it, we would allow that. I just don't want this to be a sticking point. I think we need to have the best candidate pool we can, and I don't want to use this as a sticking point.
And just as a clarification, on what Mark just said, currently the council has the authority to waive residency requirement for any position. So if there is a candidate who does not want to live in the city, cannot live in the city for whatever reason, and the council feels that they are an extraordinary candidate with justifiable reason not to be living in the city, the council has the authority to waive that to make a permanent waiver of it as of now. Harrington?
Yeah, just a point, reading the city charter, the fire chief, the police chief, the city clerk, the deputy city clerk, and I believe codes are all required to live in the city unless they get a waiver. So if we're gonna start waiving it for a city manager or a city administrator, then the bigger question becomes, do we waive it for everybody? The other question is, I know they started looking for recruitment in the police and fire service to start opening up and let them live into the town or fly by the flag and all this stuff. And I don't believe that's really had any effect on trying to get any recruitment, because as you see, we still have problems trying to recruit people to come live and work in the city of Oneonta. The other thing we also have to look at is we pay people to live in a different district to pay taxes in that district, and so we're I just think it's a slippery slope to think about, and especially the person who is going to end up being the overall person in charge of the city really should reside within the city to understand all the needs and what the problems are. That's just my 2 cents.
Okay. I think, following John's recommendation about not spending too much time on the issue, it doesn't sound to me like there's a clear support of the majority on making this change at this time. So why don't we just back burner it and move on? We're not going to throw it away. I mean, we can revisit it, but we'll back burner it. There's not clear support. So other issues on change to the job description. Davies?
So yeah, I'd like to focus on 7, 10, and 11, and I'll just throw some language out, although we can certainly wordsmith these things, but I think you'll get the idea of what I'm shooting for. Number 7 talks about the city manager may suspend or remove any employee of the city as authorized by the state law pursuant to the terms of any applicable collective bargaining agreement. I'd like to suggest that this be in coordination with the personnel director. Along the same lines with number 11, leads the annual planning and budgeting process, including the preparation of full draft budget that's presented to Common Council. I'd like to suggest that this is coordinated with the finance director. This way, we're also using the expertise of our department heads in these particular very specific areas that are specific to each of these particular department heads. And then with number 10, rather than participate in collective bargaining, I'd like to suggest that they lead in collective bargaining, lead the collective bargaining. And I think that's, I don't know, Luke, if that's what you're shooting for, but that's what I think would work there.
Okay, so just quick sense on this. Number 7 is you're stating that any suspension or removal and I'm not sure that the word officer is applicable here. Some department heads are officers that report directly to the city manager, some are not. So I'm not sure why the word officer is here and why it differentiates. But what Mark is suggesting, just adding terms that it's done in conjunction with the personnel director. Of course, you can take it another step if you want. It could require approval of the council. So any discussion on, let me just say, well, brief discussion on it. Let's start with those that are in favor of it. If you're in favor of it, do you want to raise your hand or comment? Lepardeschu?
Yeah, I agree. I think that the personnel director really should partner with the city administrator, and I think that either one of them should be able to proceed with the termination pursuant to all applicable.
You're saying either one of them, or you mean both of them in agreement?
I think they should both agree, but I
Right,
think that in terms of the person who would carry out the termination, it would be, to my mind, either the personnel director or the city administrator.
Okay. Risberger?
Question I have is, how would that work if the administrator technically oversees the human resources department? I'm just not seeing how that would work. And I think with the city administrator, if we're paying them the bigger bucks, I would think that they would be the one that would carry out any termination if any termination had to happen, rather than HR.
Can I follow up on Dave's question?
Sure.
So I know that sometimes, specifically with George, there were some challenges where sometimes things had been sort of placed on his desk and then not carried out either at all or in a timely manner. And so I think that, you know, our personnel director is really our HR expert. And I think that it's important that we authorize them to, obviously it wouldn't be without the city administrator's agreement, but I think that they should have just as much authority when it comes to personnel matters. And the other thing is, as a department head, the personnel director's termination, I think it says deeper in the charter, would have to be approved by the council. So that answers that question about the supervision piece. Thank you.
Were you saying, Katie, that you'd want the council to approve terminations
Just of the department heads.
of the department heads, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
but I will say, I do think that council should be made aware of personnel issues of a certain threshold. I know that something came across our desk as a result of a budget transfer that wouldn't have otherwise, because the city manager was authorized to approve budget transfers up to a certain amount, and then in the absence of the city manager, we had to approve it. And I just remember being kind of startled that something was going on that we just weren't aware of. So I don't know if there's maybe like a report that could come out of this or something to that effect, but I would not advocate for the city council. Well, I could be convinced, but I wouldn't initially advocate for city council to approve all terminations.
Okay. Anybody else who wants to comment in support of this, Rafter?
I think if we could understand as a council how a termination, what are the parameters around that? And I think the personnel manager absolutely has the responsibility to assure that the reason for a termination is documented and it's being done in accordance with the rules and regulations. And I think that the process would be any department head can recommend a termination of an employee reporting to them based on what they're seeing. Here's the reason for it. That would go to the city manager and the personnel manager, who in a way would assess that. Unless someone is doing something that is illegal or clearly in violation of the employee's employment, that it be handled carefully with the expertise of the legal information about conducting a legal termination could be assessed, and that management is assured that it's being done properly.
Murphy?
That's an odd way of putting it. I'm not being articulate about it.
Yeah, I would just like to speak in support of this. Mark said it much more clearly than I could because I can't enunciate today. So thank you, Mark. I think this is the right thing to do, especially on the personnel and finance side of things. I think it's a wise decision to have our capable department heads, department heads in on this, and it sounds like it's something they'd be comfortable and encourage to be doing as well. So I
I'm not sure what, Luke, what are you saying though? Are you talking about which point?
10 and 11.
Okay.
Okay. Risberger?
Yeah, I thought we were still on 7.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, folks.
Yes,
I just
yes.
walked in the door from work.
That's all right. Yeah, as far as 7 goes, the only thing I'd want to point out is that the city administrator will be doing the reviews of all the department heads. So they should have a lot of the information that goes into, God forbid, somebody has to be removed from their job.
Yeah. Can I suggest something here, which I think may touch all the bases that people are stating? That what if the language was that the city manager had the authority to remove any department head after consultation with both
Yeah.
the HR director and the council? In other words, it doesn't mean that the council has to give them approval, but there should be consultation with both the HR director and the council prior to doing so.
Are we moving to a city administrator so that the council has a little bit more influence on the direction?
I think that's correct, Lon.
So along the lines of what you're suggesting, how about the department head wouldn't be removed unless the council and the personnel director approve?
That's certainly possible. That's, you know, that's the decision of the council here.
I have,
Harrington?
I just have a quick question. Are we getting a little bit ahead of ourselves of thinking about trying to combine positions within the city administrator? Shouldn't that be the first topic before we try to go through and see what we want to change because that might actually change a lot of this for us, so we don't have to hash each one of these out.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, Scott, but I think we need to first define the position and then see if once we define the responsibilities of the position, that's most important, and then see if what we've defined works in consolidation. I don't think we should adjust the responsibilities to the consolidation. I think we should define what we want the position to be and then consolidate it if it seems to work. So I would put defining a position as the first priority. Davies.
I would support Len's statement, but I would just add the and/or with regard to council. The reason is I'm thinking just that and/or it would be under consultation with the personnel director and the common council or the common council. And that would basically rid us of the opportunity if down the road, not in this particular situation, personnel director ever had to be the one that needed to be removed. Or allows the common council to be the consulting body in that particular choice. So and/or allows us to be able to have all department heads and employees can be evaluated by council and the personnel director.
Just to clarify, Mark, I don't believe Len said after consultation with the council. I believe he said upon the needs, it would require the council's approval.
Approval consultation, it doesn't really make a strong difference to me. I was just looking to make sure that we were not wrapping ourselves
No, it's a
into
big
problem
difference
that we would
because
find later on.
Big difference because consultation just means discuss it with the council, make them aware of it, hear what they have to say about it, but retain the ultimate power to decide no matter what the council advises. Approval means you can't do it unless the council gives you the go-ahead. Do you support Len's idea, Mark, of requiring the approval of the council?
Yeah, I certainly would have no problem with that. I frankly could be talked either way on that one, whether it's consulting
Okay.
or approving. I don't have a strong
Okay.
feeling on that one way or another.
All right. Well, this is a big issue here, I think, because this is a big thing. So Are you comfortable with just a show of hands? How many people feel that removal of a department head should require the council's approval? Just by a show of hands, because I think this is a big issue. 1, 2, 3, 4. 4, 5. Okay, so I think I saw 5 hands go up saying that the city manager, administrator should have the council's approval before removing a department head. So I think that's a big issue. So I'm going to just jot that down now as a key issue for council approval for removal of a department head. And then go on from there, because I think that's a big thing to decide first. That's we can work on the language of that and the other elements around it, but if the support for that, that's a significant issue too.
Gary, that would be up on number 3. We would just strike department head.
Number 3.
Number 3 has the word department heads, comma, officers, comma, and employees. So we would just
That's
strike there.
Well, that's appointment, not removal, number 3. Removal is number 7.
I
And
apologize.
I think the term officer there is meant to be department head in number 7, or direct report. We shouldn't even say department head, because there are people who are not, we don't even have a very clear definition of the word department head, to tell you the truth. So I would just change the word officer to direct report.
Gary, I apologize. I remember this discussion years ago between officer and department head, and I don't have the answer right now because I'm not prepared for it. But I remember we had a list of employees that were actual officers, and you're right, it's not every single department head. But there was a reason why we had only officer there. I honestly, I just don't remember right now. It may take a while for me to figure it out, maybe in consultation with Dave
Yeah.
Mercer.
The charter does have a list of which department head, of who are officers. And I don't know the logic to it. There are first of all elected officials are officers. All
Right.
board and commission members are officers. Some department heads are officers and some are not. And the only difference, to my knowledge, is that an officer has to be sworn in and sign the book. I'm not aware of any other privileges that they have. So, but David Mercer could weigh in on this. I'll make that a note for David. What does an officer mean? And I don't know what the differentiation here, but we'll look into that, Dave. We'll get more information on that. Drenik?
Yeah, I just want to say that direct report makes some sort of intuitive sense.
Yeah, I think so. Leparishu?
Yeah, so I just also wanted to talk about number 6, because that is really, I think, what I was sort of getting at when we started this conversation of may suspend or remove any employee of the city. I think that we should also give the personnel director the authority to do that should be an agreement between the city administrator and the personnel director, and then either one of them can follow through with the suspension or
Okay.
termination.
Gotcha. Okay.
Thank
All
you.
right. Going back to, who is it that gave me the whole list of 3 things? Okay, Mark, what was the second one? I'm sorry, I lost track.
Not a problem. It was number 10. I was suggesting that it is rather than participates in the collective bargaining process, I think it should be lead the collective bargaining process.
Okay, does anybody object to that?
I didn't,
Okay,
what was the change?
just instead of participate in the collective bargaining process, leads the collective bargaining process. And I believe that was in the list of recommendations from the department heads.
Okay,
Okay, and what was the third one you had,
And
Mark?
the final one was along the same lines of number 7. This was with regards to number 11 with the planning and budgeting. Again, some type of coordination or consultation. I think it's more coordination in this particular case with the finance director.
Yeah, now let's, brings up an interesting subject. So let me give you a little background on the budget process. When we didn't have a city manager, the finance director would put together the budget in consultation with the council. They would come to the council and they would say, here is a list of all of the equipment, for example, because that's what we discussed last week. Here's a list of all the equipment that I received from the department heads and get their input on those items. The city manager would get the list of all equipment from the department heads and would personally select which ones to include in the budget without sharing the others with the council, because he saw it as that was his job, because it was called the city manager's budget. The city manager would, the only responsibility the city manager had was to present his budget to the council. And then the council could approve it or not approve it or change it. So that is a key difference in the manager administrator presenting their budget, which is the way it is now, in which they do not have to get any input from the council in the development of it, versus producing, we could say, lead the budget process in coordination with the council, if you prefer that approach. LaParsha?
Thanks. So one of the things that I would like to suggest is the addition of, not in this bullet, but just in general, and so it relates to this bullet, is some sort of clearly defined, regularly scheduled review process. And so I think that it would behoove us to make sure that we're setting clear expectations that we can hold this person accountable to. So I would like to suggest a line of text at the end of bullet 11 that says, so it's already says, shall prepare a full draft budget that is presented to the Common Council for approval. And then I'd like to add, if folks are in favor of this, and be responsible for the effective administration of said budget.
Carson, I saw you had your hand up.
I did, but I'm gonna hold off for right now. Thank you, Gary.
Anybody else? Okay, so just going back to focus on what Mark brought up. Do we want, are we comfortable with the language as it is now, lead the planning and budget process? Does anybody else see, agree? Is anybody else not comfortable with that and see a need to change? If you support changing that, raise your hand. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so, all right, so there does seem to be a need to change.
But I'm sorry, Gary, but
Yeah,
I did like your idea about having consultation with the council through the process. Mark, were you good with that?
Thanks, Lynn. Yeah, very much so.
Okay,
Can we
So-
just change the language to say support the finance director in the budget preparation process with regard to executing the strategic plan?
well, I think we're going in a lot of directions here. Let's take one at a time and then we'll move to yours, Katie.
Okay, thanks.
John?
Well, this may be one of the areas where administrator versus manager has relevance. The administrator may not be a role to lead in a process that like to lead in that budgeting process. The expertise of the finance director is significant in this. The administrator it strikes me that when we switch from the manager to the administrator, we're saying something about what we're expecting in terms of leadership. And with the administrator being a little bit less of a controller of the department heads.
Can I make a suggestion in the interest of time? I think there's a general consensus on where we want to go with this. If you're comfortable and letting me draft
Mhm.
something,
Sure.
and then you can rip it apart and wordsmith it or whatever. But just for saving, it's very hard to wordsmith something with 8 people.
Sure.
So I'll be happy to wordsmith something and send it out, and then can make changes. Because I think I have a sense of where we're going with this, is that most people want the city administrator to work with the council and the department director in developing the budget, as opposed to it being his or her budget that to be presented. In other words, that he or she develops the budget on their own and presents it to the council 2 weeks before they vote on it, which is the way it is now. Okay. Katie, are you okay with that, or did you have something to add to that?
No, I was just going to ask you to sum up where you thought we were headed so that we could kind of give it a
Okay.
thumbs up before you went and did that. I mean, I would just say, I think that if you could tack on again, if folks are amenable to this, tack on the responsible for administering piece. I think that sets a really clear expectation that they're expected to work within the budget that they are presented with. So.
Yeah, I think that that's covered in number 2. She'll have the responsibility for the daily administration of the city, including supervision of all employees, coordination of delivery of service, and oversight of fiscal management.
Okay.
I think that's pretty well covered there.
Mhm.
Len?
Gary, to Katie's point, is number 2 where we could add the strategic plan? Because I also would like to see
Sure.
this strategic plan added.
Sure. I'll make a note of that. Dranik?
Yeah, actually, Len, you went right where I was going. The idea of the budget being applied to the strategic plan, determining goals and benchmarks, and tracking that they've gotten to where they need to get, and looking at this terrific document that was provided to us by Katie Butker. The question was, who has the authority to, and the process for making changes and updates to the strategic plan. It's a living document, and it's impacted by so many different things, working with the engineering department to make modifications of what priorities might be. Just the same, basically, workflow as with budget.
Okay. Did anybody have any additional items to address under the job description? Katie Lepardieu?
Yeah, there are just 2 more that it's really, again, I guess about wordsmithing. But I think that this one came out of our initial meeting process when I met with the Evens. And I really liked where we were headed with this, since some of the confusion around the role is what then is the role of the city manager or administrator in concert with the mayor. And so number 12 says currently that they'll serve in concert with the mayor as a liaison for other municipalities, essentially. And I thought that we came away with something really clear that helped define the role of the mayor and define the role of the city administrator, in which we said, if the city administrator or it was manager at that time, was responsible for the daily administration of the city. And the mayor really was the sort of municipal liaison, that would clarify those roles and take away tension that is caused by any overlap. And so we came up as a group, and I think these are Mark Davies. I think he wrote out this bullet, so I'm just going to read what we had come up with, which says, shall serve when directed and as needed as liaison for the city with local and county entities. As liaison for the city and local county and entities, facilitating effective communication and the free exchange of ideas between the departments and other agencies of city government and the general public, which I think identifies them as the sort of chief, like, PR person. And so we may want to discuss that a little bit. But then it does say the primary liaison is the mayor. So I'd just love to get the Evens thought on that. Do we still feel good about that? I like I said, where that's coming from, which is basically to remove overlap and help each role function just more clearly. So yeah, I just want to throw that out. And then also, so after we talk about that, I'd like to just talk about number 9.
Yeah, let's do one
Thank
at a time.
Yeah, right.
I have trouble keeping track of one at a time, let alone 2.
Yeah, of course.
So without worrying about the details of the exact language, just by a show of hands, how many people support the concept that Katie just presented?
So just for clarity, Katie, what you're getting at is that the city administrator would be the lead liaison for the city with any other entity.
No, that would be the mayor.
I think
So
what
the
Katie was
mayor
saying,
would-
yeah.
The mayor would liaise with other municipalities and the state and the county and all that good stuff. And the city administrator would really focus on the effective administration of the city. And they could, so we have the language when directed and as needed, meaning, that's not totally without of their purview, but it's not their primary responsibility. It would be the mayor's primary responsibility.
Okay, so just a show of hands, how many support that concept? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. I have 5, so it's a majority. So we'll work, if you can, John, go ahead.
I just wanted to comment on something I observed. I think when we talk about the mayor, there's often an emphasis on representing the city for ceremonial purposes. We've got a weak mayor, but I looked at the second paragraph that says mayor is the integral part of setting legislative priorities, agenda for common council meeting common council and strategic planning, guides and advises the city manager or administrator in fulfilling priorities. And I think that in our own mind, we have to, in my mind, I think it clarifies that the mayor is not a weak mayor. The mayor doesn't vote and dictate, but he is he or she has responsibility to be very active in coordinating a lot of activities. It is not a ceremonial position. It's an
Okay, so-
influence position and coordination position. And
So you're supporting what Katie said, I take it?
yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
I
And
just think it's often said that we have a weak mayor system. I think we have a system that outside of the charter doesn't define the mayor as weak, but it does define the mayor as being an influencer.
generally,
We have a hybrid system, John.
it is. Generally, the primary definition is a strong mayor supervises the staff.
Mhm.
A weak mayor does not. But our mayor has more authorities than some weak mayors do. But if the Y stays closed much longer, I'm going to be even weaker. So, Drenick?
Yeah, so I think the distinction is between manager and administrator. And if we look at that, there are any number of things. The control room is certainly something that springs to mind. There have been any number of other things that are outside the purview of, I think, running the city, managing the city on a daily basis, and adhering to the administration of the comprehensive plan and getting all that done. There's the initiatives that are going to be taken by somebody in an administrative capacity, and that would be the mayor, to engage parties in different conversations that really are not a part of the day-to-day running of the city, but are absolutely a requirement of progress.
Right.
Okay, so I sense there's general majority support for the direction Katie was going. Katie, if you could just, why don't you email me that language and I'll add it to the list
I
of
will.
things for review? Okay, thank you.
I will. Thank you.
That was, what number was that again? That was number 12.
12.
Okay. Okay. Then Katie, you had a second one, I think, right? Or no, just the one?
Yes. Yes. I'm sort of freezing up, so I'm wondering if
Yeah.
you guys can hear me.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, we can hear you. You're,
Mark Davies, did you have something you wanted to say about number 12? Before I jump?
No, go ahead, Katie. I was going to change the topic. My apologies.
Okay, no problem. So yeah, so number 9, I literally just wrote 9 in my notebook. So let me just, I'm sorry, pull up my Google document here. Okay, yes. So I'd like to, okay, so number 9 reads currently, shall make reports as requested by the Common Council and or the mayor concerning the operations of city department offices and agencies, which I think is critical, right? That serves to their purpose as the primary liaison between department heads and the elected officials. But I would like to propose that we add something that I think would, again, just bring the council in a little bit closer without really making it our responsibility. So the sentence that I added, and this is stolen from, I read like 100 city manager and administrator job descriptions over the last, I don't know, since February. So I stole this from some other municipality, but they say, shall regularly advise council about the city's present and future financial status or needs. I think that's paramount. And I think that it's important for the understanding of council as we continue to go through the year and vote on things. Just to know, just a pulse check of, where we are to things. I know that, the finance committee is in and asking deep questions, but I think that, if we keep the city administrator on top of the effective fiscal administration, and then they are keeping us regularly in the loop, I think that would be great.
Katie, could I suggest adding to that? I think that's good. Could I suggest that we'll keep the council advised on key fiscal and operational matters as we go
That
through
sounds
the
good.
through the year?
Yeah, that sounds great.
Okay. John, you had some to add to that?
Yeah, just in passing, I'm throwing some balls into the mix here. But one of the things we as a council need to consider is how we manage or how we deal with this kind of thing. I think in the last maybe year, there have been problems related to not having someone initiate communication with us or tell us about what might be going on behind the scenes with budgeting and that sort of thing. But I do worry about how the council organizes itself to assess how the administrator is doing against all of these responsibilities. We need to be 8 people have a difficult time managing any one. It's an odd situation. And it'll be our responsibility to look at how satisfied we are with the way the administrator is doing its job and have more transparency or visibility. Whether we write that in to something in the charter that forces that, or we simply are aware of it. And also that the council is a people. So in terms of demanding things of another person, the administrator, we have to consider this notion that any one or two of us should be careful about making requests of employees to devote more time to something that a few of us want. But it's going to take their attention away from what's already on their plate. So we need to think about what it means to say a council member is requesting something and whether or not 4 others agree that some of that should be happening. We have to be good at managing the city administrator.
All right, Risberger?
Yeah, I kind of agree with John on this. I think some of this, I think, might be already built into the charter. Certainly the strategic plan. I know there is one part in the charter that I think it's after 30 days, we review the what will be the city administrator, and then they have an annual review. But between that and if we're requiring them to report to us at every council meeting, let's say, and make sure that they are including fiscal and operational issues in their report every 2 weeks. I'm not 100% sold on whether or not we need to add something more. Because it's sort of built in. It's really whether we are going to do our job, I would think, to do the proper review that's necessary. For me, though, it's the strategic plan. If they're meeting what's happening in the strategic plan, that's a good thing. And if another council member or 2 or 3 council members comes with another request, maybe what they should be doing is matching that with the strategic plan. And if it's not in there, then we have a discussion as a whole to see if we want to add it.
Yeah, I think one thing we have to keep in mind, it's difficult to have 8 bosses. And the city administrator, or whatever their title is, does not report to any 1, 2, 3, or 4 of the council members. Only reports to a majority of the council members. And we have to keep that in mind. So, Davies?
I'd like to take us in a different direction if we're ready for that.
Are we going on a different subject? Are we leaving the point we're on? Mark?
I'd like to do that if no one else has any other
Just let me then finish up. We were just on number 9, and that was advising. And you were going to send me the language on that, right, Katie? Okay, just want to be clear on that. Okay, go ahead, Mark.
So one of my concerns is that we have kind of written into the charter the city manager language. This is in section A. It's a direct statement that says that the city manager shall be qualified by possessing a master's degree in public administration and at least 3 years of successful experience in responsible executive position in government administration or equivalent. I'd like to suggest that maybe we just open that up to be a bachelor or master's degree without getting specific about the area. I think what we're looking at here and what I keep coming back to is we're looking for a facilitator, a communicator, somebody who's going to lead by working with people. And I don't know that those skills are only found in public administration degrees. I think that they're found in other places. So I would suggest that maybe be a kind of tweak to that to open up the candidate pool and recognize that other folks bring things to the table.
Okay. Let me just.
Gary, can I?
Yeah, let me just point out that this is the long debated comma that has been debated forever. And it's all how you interpret the presence of that comma after the word administration as to whether or any equivalent training or combination of experience overrides all of the above or only overrides the last thing in the sentence. So this was debated the last time around, and it was decided to interpret it as the or any other equivalent training or combination of experience could overrode everything else stated previously.
That interpretation would address my concern.
Right. But this is the long debated comma as to whether it belongs there or not. Risberger?
Yeah, I've come 180 on this one. I would like to actually keep it in there because I look at this as the ideal is a master's degree in public administration and 3 years experience. But if not that, if we have somebody that's been working in city government for 20 years and we think they're phenomenal, they still meet the qualifications to be able to be hired, even if they have a bachelor's degree.
Yeah. Davies?
Again, I'm happy to withdraw that concern based on that interpretation of that comma. And I agree, Dave, I don't mind having a wish list, but I also want to make sure that we have an inclusive pool. So I think that
Right.
or idea certainly adds to that. I have no problem with that.
Yeah, I agree.
I just didn't want it to be limited by that.
Right.
Right. No,
Mhm.
totally agree.
Murphy?
If you're all right with it, Mark, maybe this isn't an issue, but might it be a little bit easier to flip the language around so it's 3 years experience, a master's degree, comma, or is that just kind of getting into the weeds? Weeds, yeah. All right, thank you.
Yeah. It's interpreted now as meaning that the council can override, that the council can replace the MPA with appropriate experience and education. Lepari Shu?
Could we just add a sentence that says also acceptable or any combination of the preceding is deemed appropriate by the common council and the mayor? And just take out the interpretation?
Up to the group. Len?
I agree with Katie and Mark on this one. I believe potential candidates are not seeing that comma and might be limiting our candidate pool. So if we could, you might be, Katie, you might be able to get away with just the word and after administration and or any equivalent training. I don't know.
Well, actually, I liked Katie's language that she just proposed. I don't remember what it was, but when she said it, it sounded good. You want to
I'll
forward
send
that to me, Katie, and we'll see if we can work that in?
Sounds good. Thank you.
Okay, good. Okay, anything else on the job description? Okay, good. Anything, now let's go to any other issues in the charter besides changing the name from manager to administrator, wherever it currently exists. Any other actual changes? And let's not talk about charter changes that don't relate to this position. Let's not go down that road. Let's just stay focused on this position. Did anybody else come up with any other recommended charter changes?
I just want to say that I'm really proud of us for doing that.
Yeah,
Neatly.
that went well. That went well. Probably was a good facilitator.
Would you leave in an acting administrator if that's what we're changing? Or you have the acting city manager?
Yeah. I mean, we changed the word manager just wherever it's administrator. Still have acting.
I know there's other places within the charter. I forgot to jot them down, so I failed my homework. But if we're going to go to administrator, we just have to go through and just cross out where it says manager and just put administrator in.
Right.
Mhm.
If there are any other changes in actual responsibilities that anybody has come across.
Gary,
Would
Yeah, Len,
C19,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
do we want the city administrator appointing their acting city administrator, or do you want the council? I mean, I guess I'm looking at the council as a group and yourself. We want to pick one.
I would lean towards letting the administrator pick their acting, but it's council decision on that. Yeah, Drenick?
Yeah, I would just say the same. I think you need to let the person doing the job pick the person that they're most comfortable with.
I mean, yeah, I mean, this person's going to represent the administrator if they're out sick or on vacation. So I would allow them to pick the person who's going to make decisions that somebody they have confidence in, you know, who represent them appropriately. That would be my take on it. Davies?
Interestingly, it does, I mean, the line after that does say that it's subject to the approval by common council. So the
Correct.
the administrator
That's
will be
correct.
selecting that person and then council will be approving. So Len, it addresses your need if there was concerns. There's still an opportunity for council to approve or not to approve that particular selection.
That's a good point. Okay. Rafter?
In terms of when the acting person comes in and when they become disenfranchised, so to speak, does the city administrator need to be on vacation, sick, disabled? And if they in fact just pass on or something, does the status of the acting city administrator remain in place to become the continued acting city administrator, even if the original CA isn't coming back?
You know, that's two interesting questions. You know, one, the world has changed a lot in the last 10 years or so. And with cell phones and email, it used to be if you're on vacation, you were out of touch and you couldn't make day-to-day decisions. That's not true today. I mean, no matter where you are. I mean, I went to Australia, I was still in touch with people. So if there's an important decision to be made, whether it's an acting mayor or the acting administrator, they're going to be in touch with the person if there's a very important decision to be made and not going to act on their own anymore. So to some extent, it's really the primary function becomes signing when somebody is needed to sign something, because with everybody is constantly in touch right now, no matter where in the world that they are. So it's a little different.
No, I'm just thinking about they're no longer in touch. But
Because they're,
Huh?
why would they no longer be in touch?
They died, they're in a coma,
Oh,
they're
okay, okay,
incapacitated
okay.
in some way. Does that
Yeah.
mean that if the city manager's status becomes no longer engaged
That's-
with this world,
Yeah,
does that mean that any authority continues, or the council could say the acting city manager, we'd like them to continue to be the acting city manager until
yeah.
a decision is made to take them off that?
Oh, good point. And let me just say, historically, when the city manager left, the acting city manager continued in power, could be appointed interim, but the same thing with the mayor. You know, when Dick Miller died, Russ Suddard continued for almost a year in his role as acting mayor that he was appointed to be. So, but on the other hand, when George appointed Greg as the acting city manager, it's stipulated in the resolution that that appointment expired was only in effect as long as George was in office. So I think historically, the acting thing applies after the person leaves office unless it's been stipulated otherwise in the appointment. Risberger?
Yeah, I was just going to say, I would, reading this, it looks to me like the acting would just continue to serve at the pleasure of the council. I mean,
Yeah.
we could always remove them if we felt that they weren't doing the right job, or we look for somebody to replace them and hire somebody else, or hire them.
Yeah.
So it's really up to the council.
Yeah, I'm very comfortable with that, because
Okay,
it doesn't mean
good.
that they lose their that the council has to decide, should we make this appointment to continue or be the city administrator? But we retain that ability. We don't assume that they are, they no longer have powers. That's all.
Anything else in the charter or Harrington?
I think this kind of goes with the conversation we're just having, but under C19, number C, where if it says if in a result of a disaster defined by section 20 of the executive law, blah, 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 blah. I think it kind of answers a lot of those questions. If we did have, vacancies and stuff like that, I think we would just probably want this, if we do switch that to administrator, just have our city attorney just double check that language and make sure that that still would be accurate for everything.
Okay. Gotcha. Okay. Anything else in the charter that anybody went through and saw that they wanted to bring up as possibly needing modification? Okay. Let me see. I had put a couple of notes here. I made two notes. One is on page 16, F, duties of common council members. It really doesn't list any duties of council members other than it really identifies them primary legislative powers.
Mhm.
Do you want to add something there, that's consistent with the job description in terms of the council, works with the city administrator, or even directs the city administrator in their oversight of fiscal and operational matters, something to that effect. It just seems like it should be a key duty of the council, that the council, directs the city manager, in oversight of key fiscal and operational matters.
Barry, doesn't it
And
say that elsewhere though already? I mean, not
It says
necessarily
it,
in this
yes.
section.
Correct. It says it in, we just said to put it in the job description, but I just note that under duties of common council members, it's not really, it's not really, the only thing it talks about is appointing the city manager. That's the only thing I can find under duties of council members relating to the city manager and operations is the appointment of the city manager. I'm just wondering if there should be a sentence more than that about their role. If there's nobody's concerned about it, we'll leave it.
No, I agree, Gary. We should have something in there that says it's our responsibility to manage. I think John has said this over and over. We need to do our
Okay.
job, which is manage the city administrator or city
Okay.
manager.
Okay. All
In
right,
a-
I'll put some language for review.
Great.
And then the other thing I just noted is on the budget. I brought up last year, I'm not comfortable with a budget being presented to the council 2 weeks before they have to make any changes to it. I think that timeline should be expanded. And the other thing is, even George said that it was crazy to require the council to have a supermajority in order to change a line of the city manager's proposed budget. That, George himself said that gives the council way too much power. right now, if the draft budget is proposed, the council can't change a line of it without a 2/3 majority. I mean, I would leave that as a regular majority. I don't see why it would to require a 2/3 majority for the council to change a budget line.
Agreed.
Risberger?
I'm not necessarily agreeing or disagreeing with you on this, but the reason that was put in was the thought process was that a city manager or a city administrator would have more fiscal knowledge than most council members that come in and get elected, because this is a part-time gig for everybody, and we all come from different backgrounds, and some may have fiscal backgrounds, some may not. So it was something that's typically put in to prevent anyone from having a political agenda, I guess, for lack of better words, to have something else added to the budget necessarily. I'm not going to necessarily fight against this if we want to change it to just a simple majority. That's fine. But that's why the supermajority was there to begin with. And lastly, the timeline was actually put together by Meg Hungerford, and it goes back before the charter was written back 10 years ago. So if we want more time built in, we just have to do it.
You know, I just point out, Dave, that I think that after the budget is passed, a simple majority of the council can change any budget line, move money from one line to another. Why should it require a super majority to move it before it's passed? Rafter, is that your hand waving, or are you?
No, I'm just gagging.
Okay.
No, seriously, that part of this is like, why are we shifting from city manager to city administrator? I have a thing in my mind about lessening, in a way, the autonomy of the person in that position, but also with changing a budget line, I do think the budget is a guess. It's always been a guess. It's not a written in stone sort of document. And I think a simple majority should be fine to change, or at least, 5 people should be able to make a change to the budget or
Okay.
indicate they want to change.
Lepari show.
I'm sorry, I would like to discuss a different topic. So just whenever this has concluded. I don't feel
Okay.
strongly one way or another. Right now, there is the supermajority of one party. So
Okay,
it doesn't seem like it would solve that issue anyway.
okay. So if anybody still wants to talk about this budget vote, Harrington?
You were saying about, I kind of got confused a little bit. The budget timeline, is that really what you want to change, or like
Yeah,
have the
I
budget
thought-
presented to us sooner?
Yeah, that was my thinking.
I'm on board
2
with
weeks
that.
sooner.
I'm on board with that, but if we're changing some of the other stuff beforehand where they're supposed to work collectively with us,
That does make it
working on
better,
the
yes.
budget, then, but no, I'm on board with that too. Would you
Okay,
agree with you?
Yeah,
about,
no, you're right,
it
you're
should be
right,
quicker
Scott.
to us?
You're right, Scott. If you're working on it, it becomes less of an issue if you're working on it together all along. You're right. Len?
Yeah, I was just going to remind everybody that we had changed that, the verbiage, and that the city administrator was going to work hand in hand now with the council moving forward on the
Right.
budget. So I think that language will help us, and to your point, have a more definitive schedule, because to your point, waiting 2 weeks before we have to vote on it's just not enough time.
Okay, sounds good. Okay, I think we're done with the first 2 things on the agenda, which is changes to the job description, changes to the charter. I will take the responsibility of trying my best to draft. Katie's going to send me some language on a couple of the items, to try and draft the changes here that I could send out to everybody to review, and
Yep.
then make modifications, edits to it. Katie, go ahead.
Yeah, I just wanted to talk about one additional thing, which was
Sure.
and I would have to pull it up again to figure out exactly where it was, but it's something that was brought up in the all the information that Mark Drenick sent to us, which is the contract term of currently 3 years. I just like to get the council's thoughts on that. You know, when I read that, it definitely gave me something to think about. And I actually, as I was sitting here thinking about how I wanted to bring that up, it kind of struck me that, you know, that may be something that we could work into combining with the review process and the residency requirement. So, you know, I know we have the provisional time, and then there's the annual review process. Maybe we waive the residency requirement for the first 3 years, and then after 3 years, if they're doing a satisfactory job, the contract is extended indefinitely, and we offer them some sort of stipend or incentive for purchasing a home in the city. That's not the whole conversation. I mean, that's my like little niche. What I wanted to talk about is the contract terms and how everyone felt about that. So
Go ahead, Risberger.
I'd hesitate to put a specific contract term into the city charter, if that's what you were asking, Katie. I don't disagree with any of your suggestions. I think they're good suggestions, but you know, 20 years from now, we might have a totally different council. I'm sure we will have a different council.
I'll be
And
leaving.
they
I
may,
hope you have a different
they may
mayor.
they may have totally different ideas for a contract. Who knows? I wouldn't want to box us or anyone else into one specific type of contract. But I
mean,
do like the
theoretically.
ideas that you had there for a contract, though.
thank you.
Generally, terms of a contract are negotiated,
Yeah.
Right.
typically.
I mean, I guess what I was saying is we are retaining someone in this position as it stands. I think it's only for 3 years, right? And so it's possible. And so the I don't know if anybody read the suggestions from, okay. And so he had said, you know, the 3-year thing, especially with the residency requirement, is kind of a big turnoff because you're going to move somewhere for 3 years and then be unsure if your job is going to continue. So I that's what I wanted to talk about is are we married to this 3-year thing? What do we think? How can we make it more attractive?
The 3-year contract is only with one city manager. Sorry.
with George?
Yeah.
You know, let
Okay.
me say something about professional city managers.
Can I just
I
finish my
always
thought
think,
really
oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Katie. I didn't realize.
And I was just gonna say to Dave's point about locking anything down. I mean, these things that we're changing tonight were locked down in the charter, you know, however many years ago. And, you know, we may not need to lock it down. And again, it may be something that's talked about in terms of the contract negotiation. But I think that's important for us to figure it out. So thank you for entertaining my discussion. Okay, sorry, Mayor, thanks.
Go ahead, Davies.
Just to give the exact language that was recommended to help, you know, support Katie's point there, it was consider providing an indefinite contract with 3 months severance for termination without cause. So there's an out, but there's an indefinite contract.
I mean, personally, I would never sign an indefinite contract with anybody for anything, but that's just me. Drenick?
So my sense of it is that this isn't necessarily the city charter concerns, but this is something that we want to think about in terms of our advertising for the position. As I agree, we want to be able to cast as wide a net as we can so that we can do this in a fashion that generates as many quality applicants as is possible, and we can land on one person that does everything that we need to have done here. So I would suggest that it's not necessarily charter that we're discussing right now, but we are talking about what the parameters are for how we'll solicit somebody for the job.
Okay.
I do think we need to figure out the residency thing though, because did we kind of put a pin in that?
May I?
Just at some point.
Wait,
Yes, sorry.
I think we left the residency recognizing that the council has the authority to waive it anytime they want.
I kind of
Yeah,
think,
after, go ahead.
I kind of think this way. When we as a council get to a point of wanting someone to come, I put it as a question that was sometimes asked to me. What's it going to take to get John Rafter to join us? And that's where the details come out. I'm going to need a moving package. I'm going to need a 5-year guarantee. I'm going to need hot and cold running champagne. And, you know, the 3-year term with George, for example, came out of him saying, I'm an old man, and I can say that. I'm an old man. I'll give you 3 years. I will. And I just remember this very clearly. I promise you in these 3 years, 1, I won't get fired. I will not give you a reason to fire me. 2, I'll kind of act as a city manager. And 3, I will prepare someone, a current employee, to be a city manager when I leave, because I'm going to leave feet first, or I'm just leaving because my wife won't let me stay here. My wife doesn't want to come here. And I will have an apartment here because I'm not going to be the city manager from Michigan. And those were the reason. That was a reason for, oh, you give us 3 years, we'll give you a 3-year agreement. And that may have been thoughtless of us, but we were kind of happy to have someone predict their leaving, since the others leave without prediction. So there's nothing
Actually,
secret in this, but we're going to have to work with the person. If we want to make an offer, we'll have to listen to what they have to say they need to come here and make some decisions. Are we going to have a relocation package? What is it going to be? Limitless, you know, and will I really have to live in the city for, you know, and we'll have to consider that because they'll have demands too. So that's all. Consider that later.
John, you have an amazingly clear memory from 3 years ago. But yes, I do recall you're pretty much right on.
Oh, I
with
know.
those.
I know. It was, and it was that, or let's hire Meg Hungerford, but we were kind of dubious, tied into what we thought was in the charter, saying we'll just get crap thrown at us because she doesn't live in the city. She lives 15 or 20 minutes from here. She doesn't have a master's degree in fine arts or whatever it is, and we didn't realize we had the option to say we can waive all these requirements.
No, I
And
mean,
that was one, we were boxed in. We boxed ourselves in.
yeah, no, John's points are very good in terms of the negotiation process is typically very involved. I mean, your candidate may put out a lot of requests as part of a condition for signing a contract, such as, you know, I want a certain kind of car assigned to me. I want so much money for moving expenses. I want my initial 6 months of rent paid. I want, you know, extra vacation time than is normally provided, and so on and so on is what typically happens. So the length of the contract is usually ties into just one of the many gives and takes in the negotiating process. You know, unless you didn't have this a contract, an employee with a contract, and just same as any other employee, you just hire them and open-ended. That's the other thing, is there's no requirement that this position, it's the only position, the only employee in the city that has a contract.
Mhm.
So, I mean, the other consideration is,
It's kind of weird.
there could be just an employee, just as any other employee, with no contract. They get hired. They're in the job until they quit or are fired, just as any other employee. So, I mean, generally, the reason that people like a contract is because they get a lot of bennies tied in that a normal employee wouldn't get.
And in this situation, they're also perhaps moving to a new location and they want to reduce the uncertainty. Might discover that people are very unhappy that the mall is closing and they won't be able to shop here. I mean, this has happened with other institutions. Doctors have not come here because their spouses don't like the fact that there's nothing much here. And it's that their perception is this is not the perfect place to land. That's all. And Gary's perfectly right. We don't need to offer a contract, but it seems to be an assumption that often gets made with the lofty city manager. That's all. People who serve in Congress get 2 years. They don't get a contract. They have to move to Washington. They have to live with other people, probably other congressmen in a group house. And they have to depend on all the grafts for the advantage for being a congressman. Am I wrong? Nobody leaves
No
Congress to
comment.
go into poverty. Anyway.
Okay, so moving ahead, let's think about next meeting. Before the next meeting, there should be a draft of the changes for review. Actually, would be helpful if everybody gets the draft in advance and can be prepared to state any changes that they want to the draft at the next meeting. And then the next items of discussion will be on how to fill the position, how to select a person, and how to go about filling the position. There are, considerations of, and I'm just putting all of the things out there, not saying, just so they're all out there, is consideration for, consolidating it, which would limit it to a current employee and promoting from within, as opposed to doing a search, or there's doing a search, and should the search be start with just being local? Should the search be regional? Should the search be national? And do you want to hire a consultant to do this, to oversee the search, or do it yourselves? So those are the decisions to be made, to think about for the next meeting. So looking ahead at the calendar, I do want a little bit of time to get this drafted and have David Merzick review it before the next meeting. Let me look at a calendar here. Are you, today is Monday. The first day I see that's really available after 5 would be Thursday, the 29th. How does that look? And I can't see
Thinking after-
anybody right now because I'm looking at my calendar.
I'm available at 7, but I have a ward meeting before that.
Okay.
I'm available.
I'm
Thursday, the
available.
29th, 7 o'clock. Anybody not available? Okay, then let's make it 10:29 at 7 PM. I will get the draft to you. I can't promise it'll be this week, but it'll be in the first part of next week.
Thank you, Mayor.
Katie?
I'll email you, Mayor.
Okay. If there's nothing else, thank you all. And we have the SUNY Control Group meeting at 7 o'clock, which is can be watched on the YouTube channel. And other than that, we're adjourned. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Everyone.